My name is Saul Fofana, the Chief Customer Officer at Penrod, and we've really been helping the healthcare industry solve problems, challenges with technology for the past 15 years or so. And I have personally spent a lot of time with healthcare marketers over the last few years of these conversations really being dominated by compliance and HIPAA and data and everything but marketing. So today we're going to quickly review the current compliance landscape, talk about how fundamental that is, but also how it can be leveraged as a foundation for growth. And to really dig into growth, I've got my partner here, Jim Slava, who can also introduce himself.
Yeah, thank you, Saul, and thank you everybody for attending. My name is Jim Slavo, and I am going to be your resident healthcare marketer for the day. I'm really excited to be here, and my biggest passion is empowering healthcare marketers and strategy leaders on taking some of the things that we've been able to live through and implementing it back in your organizations. Yeah, my background quickly was I've been a healthcare marketer for, almost 13 years now. I've been in marketing for over 30. And really, I joined a company called Franciscan Health pre-pandemic, and really was brought in to lead digital transformation from CRM because healthcare continues to need to be more retail focused. And that is really what we were doing there, driving digital CRM transformation. Spent 5 years there doing some amazing things, generating some really good return on spend and investment there with our marketing efforts. And then I went back onto the consulting side where I still sit today. And with one goal is to just help make healthcare marketing a better experience and empower people like you all that sit on the other side of the table where I used to sit and really manage these day-to-day, marketing needs. So thank you for that. I'll pass back to you there, Saul.
Awesome. Cool. So really excited to get into really kind of the drivers and growth and measurements and ROI that we really want to spend a lot of time on today, but really want to first kind of start with the current landscape. And the point to drive home here is that when it comes to advertising, measure, optimize, communicating, the compliance layer is really that foundation. And hopefully today that we illustrate that if you nail this part, if you make the right decisions in terms of framework and technology, not only can you get back to the way that things were before, but you really have this incredible ROI engine that you can leverage. And we want to get back to ad optimization. We want to get back to some form of retargeting, but we also want to give ourselves the opportunity to measure every click in a way that we haven't been able to do before. So even measuring a click all the way from a Facebook ad to a scheduled appointment, to encounter level data in an EHR, getting true financials and ROI. And so that's really what we want to spend our time on today. So let's talk just really briefly about why compliance still matters. There's been a lot of different legal back and forth that's happened. The federal government got involved. They backed off. The community at large still has a big say in their privacy, and there's a lot of litigation happening around that. So to briefly kind of talk about this, the bottom line is that the use of third-party trackers and pixels that will not sign a BAA with you is a violation. So working through the platforms like Google Ads, Meta, the Trade Desk, Pinterest, really most of the digital advertising platforms out there will not sign a business associate agreement with you. They are not agreeing to accept or protect any information that could be deemed PHI. But at the same time, they are not really giving us any marketer-friendly tools to be able to limit or to restrict any of the data that we are sharing. So those pixels, those tags are really collecting everything under the sun and sending it out to them. And that's where that compliance breach lies. There's a lot of other things to also consider within compliance. And so the FTC is obviously keeping a keen eye using the HIPAA notification breach rule. State laws are becoming more and more prominent. We've seen places like New York and California going very strongly and kind of becoming the standard of what the rest of the nation should follow. There are also requirements now around things like consent banners and cookie management and all of those sorts of things that we want to really keep track of. And now, as of about a year and a half ago, the platforms themselves, like Meta specifically, who I'm talking about here, are really kind of taking matters into their own hands and making decisions for us as health or wellness brands as to how we are leveraging that data. So that's really the bottom line here. And then just to really quickly talk about the Meta issue on this slide here and kind of giving a list of all of the other platforms that we may or may not be using in our tech stack. And this is not an exhaustive list, but really Meta coming out last year and calling out that if they designate you as a health or wellness brand, severely restricting your access to optimization, your opportunity to really understand conversion data was the first step from the platform side. And we see the market going that way even further. The rules that they put forth for healthcare marketers were also really kind of reassuring for us to see, though, too, being so compliance focused. Because today we're going to talk a lot about, obviously, starting with the problems, but we're about to move into solutions, and solutions like leveraging the expertise that Jim has and working with Penrod and Destinations is we've solved for those challenges and we've filled those gaps that the platforms are starting to require so that you can get back to using those platforms the way that you're used to. So just a quick understanding and commiseration on the fact that this is a very collaborative effort to get this right. We meet every day with compliance teams, legal teams, marketers, their third-party agencies, IT, to come together to figure out how we're actually going to strike this balance. We are now caught in this kind of tug of war between risk versus reach. And no matter where you're on the spectrum, either you have removed all of your trackers, you're flying blind on ad spend, your agencies are having a hard time justifying ROI and deploying spend, or you're kind of at maximum risk where you're using all of these tools without a piece of technology in the middle that can help to play that traffic cop, be that safeguard, give you that peace of mind, give you that trackability, auditability, and bring people to the table to make sure that everybody across the organization is really comfortable. And that's a lot of the key here. Is technology is great and the solutions are pretty straightforward, but it's the collaboration, the working with our third parties, with our partners, with our web teams. A lot of marketers are meeting their IT teams for the first time, going through some of these and getting much more stronger relationships with compliance and legal teams in the last few years. And we've been really blessed to be a part of those conversations, bringing those teams together and really sharing the small village it takes to make sure that we're doing this right. And that we're also building ourselves up for a foundation where we can still grow and still do our jobs. So let's talk about really briefly from a technology perspective, how we can solve this problem. First, kind of lay out how we have to handle these platforms. And then secondly, just run through a quick diagram of how that data should flow to set us up for growth and for real ROI and measurement. So there are two basic differences when we're talking about the major platforms that put us at risk, but also allow us to accelerate the patient journeys that we want them to take on. So the first is analytics platforms. So here we're talking about Google Analytics, GA4. And the second are any of our ad platforms that we're using. It could be the Trade Desk, StackAdapt, Google Ads, Meta, all the big ones there. So from an analytics perspective, the biggest thing that we need to understand is web performance. How are our web pages hitting? How long people are staying, what they're clicking on, what's being engaged with, how our landing pages are doing. That's the type of stuff that Google Analytics needs to make sure that we're understanding the performance of our website and the performance of our content. But what we cannot be sending is any identifiers tied to that engagement. So this is where we hear about the issues that come about with IP address, city, state, location, device IDs, and a bunch of different issues where if we are taking both the personal identifiers and the health information associated, in this case, health information being the URL, the content that's being hit, and combining those things together in a package that we're sending out to our third-party partners, that is where the issue and the compliance breaches come about. So with analytics platforms, we want to send Google all of our page information, all of our web performance information. We need to strip out or redact any of the actual identifiers. When it comes to ad platforms, though, we actually want to be able to do the exact inverse. So if we're deploying a Meta ad and we're getting clicks on that Meta ad, we want Meta to get the identifiers. We want Meta to know who is clicking on an ad. We want to be able to understand that click ID, that individual, and we want credit for that conversion and be able to actually communicate with that interested party. What we do not want Meta to have is the contents of those ads. What are they clicking on? What is it? Ortho? Is it oncology? Is it mammography? Like what the contents of those ads are, we don't want to send. We want to know that Jim, Saul, or Matt clicked on an ad. And that's about as much as we want to give Meta in terms of separating, again, that health information from those identifiers. So just wanted to quickly go through the data guidelines. It's the quickest and easiest way we found to share kind of the two rules of how we have to be really sensitive around two very different platforms that are helping us measure performance, growth, and ROI. So I just wanted to give you a quick high level around the solutions that really solve this problem for us. And so here we're talking about Destinations, and this is Penrod's product and solution, but it's really built off of best practice marketing tools that are already available to us. And the reason this works, and the number one reason this works, is our BAA perimeter. So the fact that as a technology partner of yours, we sign a business associate agreement, and any of the enterprise level software tools out there that you're using, like Salesforce in this example, would also sign a BA with you. So what we're looking at is Penrod leveraging Google's cloud platform and Google Tag Manager, where so many of our marketers are actually living and existing today, and not wanting to change their workflows really at all. We want to stay in marketer-friendly tools that we're leveraging to help solve this compliance issue. But also, if we add a customer data platform into the mix to help us solve this problem, and in this example, we're using Salesforce because it is the Gartner right-hand quadrant best-in-class customer data platform. In this example, we can do some really great things, not only to get back to where we need to be, but to also supercharge that growth. And so that's what we'll talk about in just a moment here. So the way our solution works, we've got our BA perimeter set up, which means that we can ingest and work with data as it's coming in, IP addresses, city, state, location, click IDs, all that stuff is coming in. And what we're doing is we're setting up our server, which is acting as a traffic cop. So as individuals, as prospective patients or returning patients are hitting our websites through natural search, through a great meta ad that we placed, our trackers are all firing, our pixels are firing. But what we are doing is we are intercepting and redirecting all of that traffic to us first, applying those two rules that we just shared on that previous slide, which kind of runs through our redaction engine and filters out all of that data, cleaning it before it ever leaves that perimeter, before it ever leaves that blue box, and hitting analytics, hitting the trade desk, hitting Meta, hitting Google Ads. So they are only getting a subset of that data that's compliant. As I said, it takes a village. So we work with teams, we work with multiple teams across the organization to get it done right. We also bring our expertise to bear, our templated understanding of the law to bear, and then work with you on any other edge cases, use cases, or local or state laws that we want to make sure that we're also being fair around. Now, the issue that arises now is great. We're compliant. We can use these tools. We can run these trackers. We can get nearly up to speed. But what we've done, and let's go back to the previous slide for a moment, is what we've done is we have now turned our platforms into far less reliable reporting tools. If the Metapixel was out there collecting maybe 25 different points of data, now we may only be sending them 5 points of data from a compliance perspective. And so when our agencies or when we are going in and trying to understand optimization, understand performance, they don't have a lot of the data that we're used to having. And in comes a customer data platform like Data 360, where now, because we've got this BAA layer, this compliance layer, we can actually share all of that raw data directly with you in a HIPAA compliant data warehouse space to store data. So we're giving the health system, the provider, we're giving the healthcare company, the healthcare marketers, all of that information, the unredacted URLs, the IP addresses, the locations, the device IDs, the click IDs, everything that matters. We're keeping all of that information whole and dropping it right in for you so that you can now leverage that data to fill those gaps that we've created in those platforms that we typically rely on. And then also get to a point where we can do not only getting back to where we were, but then we can really get into growth, really get into driving patient experiences, driving loyalty, and a lot of the stuff that Jim is going to get into in a moment here. But because we have this CDP for compliance, we now have a massive opportunity to do things like pull in EHR data, pull in CRM data, pull in third-party claims data, and start to really understand our customer base, start to segment much deeper, start to communicate much more personally on a scale that we haven't been able to do before. And that's what we're going to get into here in a minute. So I'm going to pass it off to Jim to talk about real growth, talk about getting into what we do best as marketers, is truly market, now that we've got that compliance layer in place, and creating this rich, tailored digital experience that's really steeped in measurement and in ROI.
Yeah, thank you, Saul. Appreciate that. And I think as a healthcare marketer, we all understand the need for compliance. And we're gonna continue to build off that bridge. For those of you who don't know me or maybe have not yet partnered with me, you'll learn very quickly that I am obsessed with data and really ensuring that we're making data-driven decisions. My mantra is that every marketing effort really needs to start and stop with data. We need to make sure that we are building the right audiences with the right data sets, and then measuring everything that we do along the way to get us to this ROI and insights piece that sits on the right-hand side. So again, you're compliant, right? Let's go through now that mantra. We've gotten you into our destinations product per se, or you have a HIPAA compliant redaction tool. As a healthcare marketer, like, we care deeply about compliance. Obviously, we have to. Here's the reality, though. We're measured on outcomes. We're not measured on if we're compliant or not, right? And so this really has kind of set a lot of marketers back and taken them off the focus of what they really are being measured against, which is driving growth and driving outcomes that they can truly measure. And so as teams and budgets remain lean, we have got to show value in our efforts, right? And there are gaps in between the compliance layer and this ROI piece. And this is what I've seen throughout my career. Very super smart healthcare marketers and strategists that understand where they need to land, but they often don't know how to get there, whether it's aligning teams internally, whether it's centralizing data, whether it's getting very strategic on how they're going to market. There's a lot of in between here that we're going to spend quite a bit of time talking about. So we're going to pivot now from the compliance layer to the bigger picture of really driving growth, retention, and demonstrating ROI by delivering exceptional patient experiences that improve patient lifetime value. And I want to share with you what we look at as this overall view of precision marketing and how it ties together in our landscape today. So when we talk precision marketing, we are moving beyond the traditional model of just broad reach awareness. For those of you managing health systems, you know the pain point, right? Your marketing is often disconnected from the clinical reality of the patient journey. We're required to do a lot of things up front around awareness and consideration. And then there's a shift to things that fall outside of our purview around clinical delivery, but yet we're expected to pick things back up and retain these patients, right? And interact with them after. And we're doing this blind, right? Without the data. So the fact of the matter is that precision marketing is like the synthesis of 4 critical pillars. It's data readiness, it's audience segmentation, it's campaign activation, and then it's ROI, right? With having like the center of it being around a governance model and true orchestration between cross-connected dependency teams internally, right, within your organization. We're going to talk a little bit about that because that's critical. But these are the pillars that start to make up really, how do you really drive growth? How do we connect the dots between teams, right? We definitely have to acknowledge that regulatory landscape. And, Saul, thanks again for kind of laying that foundation and that groundwork. But when we think about this growth engine, this is where we start to solve like the growth questions that are out there by unifying data that provides a single view of our constituents. And we're going to define what constituents is because it's important. As our day-to-day audiences, right, our patients that are out there, the people that we're communicating with as marketers, as technology and experiences outside of healthcare continue to evolve, there is a driving expectation that we in healthcare need to treat people as people and not just patients. So when we talk about constituents, it is very common in today's world that a constituent could make up a variety of things. You can have a patient who is also a donor, who also might be an employee, or it could be a physician who is also a donor and maybe a patient, right? There are lots of layers of nuances. And with the technology that's out there today, and with the ability to drive true targeted marketing, we need to understand who these people are as a whole person and not just who they are as a patient in order to then put the right messages out to the world to drive the right levers of growth, right? And so as we continue to think through this, the bottom line here is that this architecture does 2 things. It's going to help optimize spend by providing insights on what campaigns are driving the demonstrable value. And then the other thing that we are going to be doing here is that we're going to make sure that the growth engine should not just increase net new patients, it should also increase and retain patients, right? Because the real goal here as a marketer is to increase patient lifetime value, right? And that is going to be a big thing that not everybody's doing today, and not many are doing as well as they should be. So it's really about building a data-ready ecosystem that makes your health system easy to navigate, more clinically aligned, and significantly more efficient. And that is how we want to be measured as marketers in today's world. I'm going to give you an example of kind of what this looks like in real life. So we've got, and I want you to think of this a bit as the retention layer that's also coupled with like the top of funnel performance teams, right? because oftentimes when we'll talk, they're a little bit disconnected. But I want you to meet Bill and really see how this precision framework can work to bridge the experience and the ROI gaps that we just talked about. So Bill's journey, it shows the power of automated patient-centered marketing. In this scenario, Bill sought urgent care for a sudden illness. He did a quick Google search. He got some AI-generated responses. Your organization has been spending some time here, so you guys were part of that initial AI's response that pushed out. And then Bill ended up clicking in to get to your website, where he then scheduled a same-day appointment for urgent care, right? Because he had a pretty bad stomach pain, right, going on, some kind of bug he picked up. So he goes in, has his visit, right? And after he leaves his visit, the system here on the back end recognized that Bill does not have a primary care with our organization. And so by triggering an automated, personalized nurturing campaign following his visit, we're able to successfully guide him from a one-time urgent care patient into scheduling a primary care appointment. And this little bit of nuance significantly increases his lifetime value to the health system, right? And so what this is meant to illustrate is that growth is not just new patients. It's keeping the ones that we have. It's building and essentially kind of like helping to cross-market all the benefits of the variety of services that we offer in a very patient-centric way, right? And this is where we start to bridge the gap between CRM and the EHR. By leveraging access and capacity signals, we can operationalize things like next best action. And if you think about it, right, instead of like a generic newsletter campaign that might be going out today, and for those of you, if that's where you're at today, great, glad you're doing something. But we need to get to a point where we're automatically triggering wellness reminders, we're retargeting high-value missed appointments, right, care gap alerts, and true follow-ups for unfilled referrals, right? These are just really because all of these things start to really drive stickiness with our patients. And all that stickiness really generates growth, not just for net new patients, but for existing patients, right? And really what we want to be able to do here is we want to essentially move that patient experience from a transactional experience to more of a continuous, continuum of care experience, right? Where we know this patient, where they're going. The other thing that I'll say here before we go to the next slide is acquiring a net new patient is about 5 to 25 times more costly than retaining an existing one, right? And so when you can leverage tools that can automate some of this to make sure that we're engaging our existing patients, that is something that not enough health systems are yet doing today. But if we think about things outside of healthcare, and if I'm thinking about Bed Bath & Beyond or Best Buy, their approach is a little flipped, right? They are absolutely understand that if I can get more out of my existing customers, that lifetime value for that customer, it goes exponentially higher, right? And so that's where we're at right now in healthcare is how do we connect the dots between siloed, disconnected teams who are all really driving toward this idea of delivering the best patient experience, but how do we bring it all together so that way teams are delivering the right message at the right time to not only drive net new, but also do a better job of retaining and closing the back door so patients don't leave the system and go to the competitor. This is where it starts to really make sense, right? Across a financial background, right? And again, I want to make sure we stay focused on that mantra, start and stop with data. We're never going to find people like Bill and give him the experience I just outlined if we don't have the right data into a centralized place where we can harmonize this data and we can then segment effectively to then do these automated personalized outreach pieces, right? Additionally, if we don't bring in all of our top of funnel data from our ad platforms, our compliance, our consent data, our preference data, right? In addition to our CRM data, that engagement data, we also need to bring in all of the EHR data that makes sense so we can actually create a single slotted view, right? And map it back to the financial data, right? And so I talk to health systems and health leaders constantly, all the time. And they're always investing in either data infrastructure or, again, service line marketing, right? We can name a whole bunch of these. But oftentimes, they still can't answer the basic question. Did that campaign drive an appointment where that patient showed up and it was attached to clinical outcomes that can be realized as revenue against that campaign, right? We only get so far in most of these situations. And so in this idea of precision marketing, unified data is the prerequisite, right? It's not a nice to have anymore. Okay. And so we need to remember this. In order to stitch all this together, we've got to have that data, because our patients, unlike us in the health system, right, where we're a bit disconnected and siloed, our patients or your patients, they don't experience your organization in silos, right? They search online, they call your contact center, they visit your website, schedule an appointment, right? They show up for care, and they hopefully come back. So that journey, it spans dozens of touch points across marketing's operations, clinical teams, data and analytics teams to pull it all together to understand what's working, what's not working. But most health systems manage all of that in these disconnected systems. And disconnected systems truly mean disconnected growth, right? And we know this, right? That patients don't convert in a straight line, right? If you're a healthcare marketer, multi-touch attribution and understand how all this comes together, it's a lot of work. I'm not going to lie. It's not easy, but it's also not impossible. And more health systems are doing this better today, every day. Someone searching for a cardiologist, for example, might see a banner ad, visit your website twice, make a phone call, and then, click a meta ad before ever booking something, right? Wouldn't it be great to have those data points and those touch points in a unified structure, so that way you can start creating these engagement scores and understanding how your marketing budget is working best by which vendor and which channel and which creative. These are the things that we have the ability to do now in the current state, as long as we're understanding the value of this unified data set. And then you can take all of that top of funnel data to then better inform how we, work to retain all of that hard work, right? Because one of the worst things to do is to get all of this time, effort, and build a great experience to get a net new patient to come in, only to have them go somewhere else the next time they need something, right? I think we can all agree that you cannot optimize what you cannot see, right? And at the top of the funnel, marketing teams spend real budget on paid search, social, email campaigns, a variety of other, performance marketing options, right? And it's often disjointed from what even brand teams are doing, right? And what they may be focused on. So we start to think about, everybody's really moving toward this idea of delivering these better experiences, but teams are disconnected and data's disconnected, right? So without, connecting that activity from the top of the funnel to the downstream, scheduling, revenue data, comorbidities, right? Other things that this person has in that we may know about them if they're already, say, an active patient, you're only working with half the picture, right? So you might be doubling down on campaigns that drive clicks, but never really filling exam rooms, right? Unify the data, and then you can tie a campaign dollar to the completed visit. And that's really how smart resource allocation really takes it to another level, right? And so we need to start asking the right questions, right? And again, I do work with a lot of health systems where performance marketing teams are really focused on the things that they matter and matters to them. But oftentimes it's a little bit, again, disconnected of kind of where we're headed as a whole, right? And so what we want to be able to do is to start bridging the gaps between people that are, say, performance marketers, even brand owners of the brand, and really connecting the dots with the work that you're doing, with great work. But you got to start connecting it to more of the clinical side and the service lines and the clinical teams, right? Your pop health organizations that are in the system, and making sure that we're having this more connected view, so that way we can ingest the data from all of these sources, because these people are touching and having relationships with us around a variety of public touch points. Getting that data into this unified approach where we can unify everything we know about them and talk to them effectively, to then be able to then reactivate, whether it's to an email campaign, or whether it's sending out better targeted message down the road, following compliance, of course, into an ad platform, or sending things over to your EHR to better inform using some behavioral data, right? All of this has to really come together. And so we need to ask the questions on, like, hey, what does it cost to acquire a patient by service line? And what is the lifetime value of a patient from a specific campaign, right? And, which referring physicians are driving the highest value cases? These are the data that's going to help us make better decisions and help us drive better segmentations to help get people to just, ensure that patients are not just having us do a couple things for them, but they're doing multiple things, whatever they need, and they're constantly coming back, right? None of those questions have good answers, right? Without unified data where marketing teams work with CRM teams and they work with access teams and they work with IT and analytics, right? This is a time where we as marketers, we have to take the reins and we have to go lead the change. We have to bring teams together, and we are the right ones to do it because we understand this patient experience better than any, but we really need to really work together within our own departments and really do a better job of cross-functional collaboration because the patient deserves it, right? So I want you to start thinking bigger picture, right? And when you have all of the right data, and think about this again, this is your consumer data that might be coming in from various engagement sources, right? That your patients and your not yet patients are interacting with. And we're able to bring consumer data into the fold and then layer in our clinical data, where we know more about what they're doing with us in the health system and connect it to some of those things outside the health system. And then maybe even layer in some additional data, right? These are things like claims data or, propensity modeling, new mover data, right? There's social determinants of health data. When we can get to a world where we're layering this data into one unified profile and one view of the patient, you will unlock a plethora of use cases that will then immediately drive instant revenue and growth tied back to not just did they click on our ad and land on our page and they requested an appointment or they scheduled an appointment, but you're going to be able to take this even further to say that not only did they engage on our tactic, but they scheduled an appointment, they showed up for the appointment, here is the revenue from that appointment, and we learned some things about them, and actually that drove our next best action off of a comorbidity or an annual wellness visit that they are due for, or a missed appointment, right, that they have in 2 weeks, right? You'll be able to do a variety of use cases once you have this data unified and truly move marketing from becoming this idea traditionally of a cost center into being a true revenue generator that is leading many departments within the health system as being a top tier revenue generator. This is just going to pull it all together. And this is just what I've seen in my 12 plus years of very dedicated healthcare marketing coupled to the nearly 30 years in marketing in general. We need to move. Yes, we need to be compliant because that's the table stake. And if you're not compliant, yeah, let's chat. But that's not what we're solving. We're solving how do we deliver patient experiences that make people want to come back, that make people want to tell their friends and their family members, and that we create sticky relationships, right? And how are we measuring that and working internally with our cross-connected teams to make these handoffs seamless to the patients that we work with and we deal with, right? And help them understand how I can deliver an exceptional experience to a patient who then becomes an ambassador, who then says, I loved what I experienced and I'll become a donor to this part of a philanthropy giving experience, right? And I love them so much, I might even want to get a job there. Like this is all realistic, and this happens when we really up our game and deliver exceptional experiences. I know, Saul, I wanted to open it up to you or maybe to anybody who may have questions. I know we covered a lot there in the last 40 minutes, but hopefully it's resonating.
Yep, we've got the chat. We've got 5 more minutes just to answer questions. So seeing what comes in, and then we will take them as they come. Let's see here. Jim, I'm going to send this one to you. Our performance marketing team and our service line CRM teams operate separately. Where do you typically see health systems start when connecting acquisition and retention?
Yeah, well, great question. And it's exactly what we started talking about. I'm going to be brutally honest, okay? So people are either going to like me or not, and that's okay. It starts with a conversation. And I know that sounds so minute and simple, but the reality is that my experiences working in healthcare is that we've got to extend olive branches and go talk to our cross-connected teams to understand, hey, how can we come together to truly make sure that we're connected on the data and maybe the things that you're doing top of funnel marketing, how can I support you from my CRM side of the group and say, look, let's make sure we're delivering a really amazing experience that runs through what they're experiencing from the ad placement side all the way through the website, and then being able to then pick them up within CRM with the data that we've learned from them or data we already have to then put them into, some kind of follow-up where we're delivering the right information to the right person at the right time at scale, right? So I think it's really about understanding that like, hey, we're not competitors. We do different things, but we touch the same people, and that we absolutely need to have a conversation to understand what are you focused on? What are your priorities? What are your initiatives? Let's find something where my initiatives overlap, and let's give a pilot project to figuring out how we can do this better together. By the way, let's tap our brand folks too, because let's run a full end-to-end campaign that's driven off of the same brand messaging that resonates with our organization, and that also taps into the ad they click, which then falls into the email that they get, and kind of go from there, right? That's where I would start. And then we know it's going to spin off from there. Like, okay, well, if I want to do all of this, I'm going to need some data that maybe I have today, maybe I don't. I'm probably going to need somebody from our analytics side to help us stitch together how we're collecting the data and being able to, create this internal kind of multi-touch points, right? How are we bringing that together in either a dashboard of some sort, so that way we can validate that we are seeing growth and that we are tracking all of these touch points and it did lead to this encounter. Because at the end of the day, that value prop is going to help us solve the question that CFOs really care about, which is, hey, how did this campaign generate money, and how are we justifying the work that we're investing? So it starts with a conversation, but it really then leads into, let's find something that we are both, working on, and let's build out this end-to-end approach together on a pilot program.
Awesome. Thanks, Jim. I've got one that I'll take really quick. How do you define a conversion all the way through to the EHR? So this is an exciting one for us because it started a lot of conversation. And so if we take, let's say, the MyChart example for the Epic users that we have, a lot of our marketers are losing sight of what happens after somebody says, book an appointment. Leaving and exiting our web experience and moving over into that MyChart experience is where that black box happens. And so we have the ability through our consulting and through our products to leverage a little or lesser used tool that Epic has called Link Source, and actually be able to, while they're leaving our experience and moving over into Epic, toss a little bit of code, a little bit of tracking in along with them so that we can actually understand the rest of that journey that happens, pull that data out of your EHR and actually kind of rejoin it and understand what that looks like. It's been a really successful, really exciting thing for our marketers and for their agency partners to be able to see that going all the way down to the revenue piece, and we can help, and we'd love to show it to you. One more question, and I'm going to pass this one back to you, Jim. The question's, how do you prove that marketing drove revenue and not just clicks? I think the bigger thing here is, what's a realistic timeline to show ROI?
Yeah, well, I think this is a question it's going to be driven based off of what the campaign is, and understanding that the attribution window is different for different campaigns. For example, if you're running a bariatric surgery campaign, we know that it takes people longer to work through that funnel and that actual decisioning process, and as well as other components that make up eligibility. And so you may not see true attribution on a bariatric campaign for 12 to 18 months. But if we were to look at campaigns like screenings, where, we can build a system that really delivers a very straightforward message, where there is access and there is capacity to get people in quickly, it's not uncommon for us to show ROI in, 90 days, 120 days, and really start to shape what good looks like, right? And that's where we tell a lot of clients to say, let's get started. Let's find a campaign where there is access, there is capacity, and everybody understands these campaigns well enough to get moving quickly. And then that's really how it works, right? We get started with one, we show the value, we take those earnings that stitch together this very linear line of, hey, they did these things and we can validate that marketing touched them, and then they converted in this window. We take that back to our senior leadership, including the financial teams. And that's where we start to really build value, and they understand, like, okay, I think we got something here. Now, how can we scale this?
Awesome. Cool. I think those were the key questions that came through. I think the big thing is just the next steps in moving forward. two things. I think Jim and I really want to talk. We really want to kind of share more of this demo to anyone who wants to see this stuff in action, see what these conversions look like, see what this data can look like, see what compliance can look like in real time, and kind of go through how we can solve this from both that compliance layer all the way through to ROI and have those conversations. And then secondly, and very obviously, we want to listen to really hear where you're at in this journey. Do you already have a compliance tool, but you're not back to where you were from a measurement perspective? Are you still kind of at risk and need to have an urgent solve? Where are you at in that journey? We want to hear and listen to where we could insert in as a part of that journey and partner with you for the rest of it.